Assalamu alaikum everybody and welcome back to the Y Factor. Joining me in this, on the phone at the moment is Brett James from the Australian Federal Police. Brett, how are you going today?
Good, thanks Mustafa, thanks for having me.
All good. So we're here today to discuss the arrest that happened on Wednesday in regards to men facilitating travel of other young men overseas to fight in Syria. So I think I would begin by asking, under what legislation have the individuals been arrested?
Okay, the individuals were arrested under legislation called the Crimes, Foreign Incursions and Recruitment Act. That legislation was enacted in 1978 and has been available to law enforcement since that date, and it's Commonwealth legislation.
So why specifically is this legislation being implemented now when there are examples of people going overseas to fight many times in the past?
Well, the legislation was enacted in 1978, so it's been around for quite a while, and we have used it previously, but basically the legislation makes it illegal for a person to travel to a country to fight, to be trained to fight, or to engage in hostile activities. So regardless of any government position on the conflict or the conflict at point, it is illegal for a person to independently travel to fight. So I really want to emphasise the AFP and its partner agencies, we target criminal acts, not specific sections of the community. So people travelling to Syria to fight or to train or assist others to do so are actually committing criminal offences against this legislation.
I understand that, but the sense I get from conversations I see on Facebook and on the internet is that the Australian government doesn't want to support Muslims who are seeking to support Syrians. Is this a true reflection of the strategy currently being implemented?
No, I don't think it is. I think... Sorry, can you just ask that question again, Mustafa? I just missed that.
So basically, I was asking about whether or not you think that the focus and the strategy on the Syrian conflict specifically, is that a reflection of the government's position on the Syrian conflict? That is, that they don't want anyone supporting the rebels?
No, I don't think it's about supporting the rebels or not. I think what we're looking at from a criminal perspective and from a community perspective is two things. One is, as I said before, to go over and fight independently in any conflict is a criminal offence. But the other aspect of it, and this needs to be very clear, is the government's primary position is the protection of citizens of Australia. And one of the things we've noted, particularly in this investigation, is that young men travelling over to Syria to fight to engage in these hostile activities run the risks of losing their life. And that's something that we've concentrated on. And our position has been from the very start of this is primarily to disrupt the travel of these young men, because we don't want them to go overseas and fight in a conflict as an independent person.
But you can understand why the community would feel demonized and targeted, because it hasn't been implemented at all for the past, however many years. And then suddenly you've had two men, arrested and all these travel being blocked. Why now? Why the focus? Why the brazen approach now?
I can understand the community thinking that, obviously, with this being so only happening a couple of days ago, but this is actually not the first time that we've applied the foreign incursions legislation. For example, last year, the AFP, in cooperation with Queensland Police and also Victoria Police, we investigated a number of people with respect to allegations of travelling overseas to undertake training to assist hostile activity in West Papua. So it's not just isolated to Syria. I mean, we identified a criminal offence and we investigated it. So one man was subsequently prosecuted for that offence, and that related to training in the use of explosives and arms with the intention of committing an offence against the Crimes, Foreign Incursions and Recruitment Act. So he actually pleaded guilty to that charge and was sentenced. So, whilst I understand we're talking about Syria, it's a very topical point at the moment, it's quite an emotional subject. The legislation and the activities that we undertake apply to a criminal offence. So it's not subject to any particular community or person, it's just if a person's committing a criminal offence, it's something we will investigate.
Yeah, so what you're saying is that no matter what side someone goes or someone travels to fight for, they will be stopped. So if someone travels to fight with the Assad regime or with Hezbollah, will the legislation also apply?
Yes, it will. It will. So we realise the Syrian conflict is an important issue for many people in our community. But our stance, and I know the government's stance, is that there's no justification, for violence. So any citizens, any Australian citizens or residents travelling to conflict zones, represents a serious problem for us and our intelligence services and the wider Australian community. And as I said, the government's primary focus is the protection of Australian citizens. So, we will continue. It doesn't matter where the conflict is, and it doesn't matter who the person is travelling or who they're aligned with. The fact is, if they go independently into a conflict zone and take up arms, that goes against the legislation, and that constitutes a criminal offence.
So the question is, Brett, because there are known examples of Israeli citizens or men of Israeli background travelling to Israel to join the IDF and fight in that conflict. You can see how that would cause a perception of double standards amongst the community. How is it that these men can go over and fight with the IDF, but men can't travel to Syria?
I think the big difference in this is that the Israeli Defence Force is a legitimate military force of a sovereign state, so the sovereign state of Israel. So serving in or undertaking preparations in anticipation of serving in a foreign defence force, it's not an offence. So if you have a look at the legislation in the Crimes, Foreign Incursions and Recruitment Act, there's actually parts of that legislation which address that issue. So someone going over to fight in the IDF, they're actually not committing an offence.
But don't you consider that as double standards? Because basically what you're saying then is that someone can actually travel and fight as part of Assad's army?
No, I'm not saying that, but I mean, my position is that I don't look at double standards. The AFP's position is that if it's a criminal offence, we'll investigate it.
So basically, as long as they're fighting as part of a sovereign nation's army, they will receive the green light from the Australian government.
If that sovereign army is a legitimate and recognised military force of a sovereign state, yes. So
the issue is at the moment that because the rebels in Syria are not representing a sovereign state and are not a legitimate army for a sovereign state, the act of joining them is a crime.
The act of joining them and taking up arms, yes, is a crime.
So basically, does the law apply even if people go to Syria but are not there to fight? So, for example...
No, it doesn't. If you go to Syria and you're not fighting, you're not committing an offence against the Crimes, Foreign Incursions and Recruitment Act. Right. Because the major part of that legislation is that you have to take up arms and engage in the conflict. So there are a number of people, as I'm aware, over there for humanitarian purposes, and they're obviously not committing offences.
How are you? Yeah.
I think it's important to note that the government have made a number of releases in relation to travelling to Syria, and one of the things I would like to say is that we don't recommend Australia's travel to Syria or its border regions, and the people look at other options, legitimate humanitarian and democratic ways in which you can help the people of Syria, because all you're doing by travelling over there is putting your life at risk.
How is the Australian Federal Police making the distinction between people travelling for humanitarian purposes and people travelling to fight?
That's a good question. But basically, if we were, and I'll speak hypothetically, if there's an investigation running, you would hope that we'd be able to identify what the difference is between the person travelling. And we might even approach that person if we identify that they're going to travel and have a chat to them and speak to them about what their purposes are. We've done that on a number of occasions.
Okay, so I'll just move ahead a little bit at the moment in terms of community engagement, because one of the major issues that has emerged in this is that the community was not engaged in any way as part of the AFP's investigation process. Why is that? Why was the community not engaged at all to do some prevention or some early intervention when these individuals were identified? If they were identified for legitimate reasons and they were identified for something dangerous, why was the community not engaged or not spoken to? There's a feeling that there's a lot of action being taken without consideration of the impacts on the community.
Yeah, no, I understand. We do have community liaison teams. They're established in Sydney and Melbourne, and they meet with community leaders, organisations, governing bodies on a regular basis. So, as you can probably appreciate, when an investigation's running and it's ongoing, we're very limited to what we can release to the community. But at the same time, we have a continuing process with our community liaison teams and we work closely with New South Wales Police and also Victorian Police to engage members of the community with the purpose of facilitating a situation where we'll be able to address any areas of concern, but also to develop and build a strong relationship. Now, the issue of Syria has been ongoing for quite some time, and I do know our CLT teams, our community liaison teams, are liaising with the community on a regular basis in relation to Syria and trying to get the message out, particularly in relation to the fact that it's an offence and it's also dangerous for young people to go over there. So that has been ongoing. But in relation to when you talk about the investigation, whilst we mightn't outwardly engage with the community in the sense of talking about the investigation per se, there has been a significant number of young men that we have disrupted from travelling to Syria during that investigation and during that time. So, this included passport cancellations, it included engagements with members of the families and the community, and it actually included approaching the men themselves prior to their travel, to discuss their intentions. So, the focus of all our actions really has centred around stopping them from travelling into a war zone. And our primary focus was to stop them from travelling, and we worked as closely as we could with members of the community, their families, in an attempt to dissuade them from entering Syria. But as you can appreciate, if a person over the age of 18 years of age isn't subject to a passport cancellation and really wants to travel over to Syria, they may find a way to do that.
But I mean, what specific steps has been taken to look at the impacts that these actions, cancelling of the passport, standing in the way of the young men, the prevention of the facilitation, have people looked at the impact that will have on the wider community, especially the opinions of government officials and policing officials? Because the fact that nobody believes that there is any engagement with the community reflects quite badly on the officials.
That's something we don't want, and our engagement's going to be ongoing with Syria. I think this is going to be an ongoing issue, and it's appropriate time to talk about it. And I think feedback from the community is going to be very important. Once again, I'll state it again. Our primary focus is to stop these young men from travelling, not to arrest or charge them. We don't want them placing their lives at risk in a conflict zone. So, we're going to continue to work with the community as closely as possible, and I hope this action will actually encourage the community to engage with us further and to talk openly with us.
Yeah, but the issue is that they want to see action being taken in terms of the consequences on the community and the wider community. They want to see actual consideration being taken on the positions, because as part of the community has a lot of connection with Syria. A lot of them have family and friends and relatives down in Syria. So there's a lot of feeling of standing up for the oppressed and so on. And the action being taken by the AFP at the moment doesn't reflect an understanding of the community's stance on the issue. Is any action going to be taken, at least in future, to take that into consideration?
Well, I think this comes back to what action what action does the government recommend that people should actually take in relation to Syria? I think it's very clear that travelling over there and fighting is something that's not acceptable because it's a criminal offence. And if we step back to what I was talking about before, there's legitimate humanitarian and democratic ways that people can assist, and that includes making donations to United Nations agencies or non-government organisations that are providing humanitarian assistance in and around Syria, participating, engaging in peaceful legal protest activity, or writing to your senator or representing the federal parliament. So there's other ways in which we can engage, in which people in the community can engage outside of going over there and engaging in armed conflict.
I understand that, but I'm sure you can understand that people will feel that that's just not enough when people are dying and starving over there.
Yeah, no, I totally understand how people would feel about that, and it's not something that anyone wants to see, but I think Mr. Drennan, our deputy, was quite clear the other day when he was in the press conference where he stated, that the answer isn't violence. There's other ways in which people can assist in the process in regards to Syria.
I understand that, but a lot of young people are probably seeing that violence is already happening there. I mean, it should be their right to stand up for what they believe in if it's not affecting the nation here.
Yeah. Look, as I said before, I guess the major issue isn't from the AFP's perspective is that going over there and fighting or facilitating or organising young people to go over and fight and put their lives at risk is a criminal offence. And whilst that still stands, that's what we'll investigate. And people really need to look at other options, other peaceful options in which they can assist the people of Syria.
Look, well, I'd like to ask a little bit further just in terms of how many people have the authorities stopped from travelling to Syria?
Look, it's a significant number. Up to around about 30, without giving specific numbers. But I'll say again, our primary focus isn't to arrest or charge these young men. Our primary focus has been to actually stop them from travelling. We're interested in the people that are facilitating the travel of these young men and convincing them to go overseas to put their lives at risk. So there has been a number of disruptions of travellers along the way. And to just give you an example of some action, only just last week we had a young male under the age of 18 who we identified was at the airport and about to get on a plane to Syria. We worked very closely with his family in the short time frame that we had to actually get him off one of the flights, and we worked with the family's assistance. His travel was stopped, and we're going to continue to work with that family to ensure that he doesn't travel to Syria and he receives any assistance that he or the family requires to get him back in step with the community.
So has there been follow-up with some of the individuals that you guys have stopped travelling?
Absolutely. We'll continue to engage with anyone if they're willing to engage with us.
So, look, unfortunately we do have to wrap up, but I can take it that the major focus of the Australian Federal Police at the moment is to implement the legislation at hand, that is that to stop people travelling and putting themselves in danger. Is that what I'm gathering from your points?
Yeah, my point is, government and the Australian Federal Police, our primary focus is to stop people from travelling and putting themselves at risk.
Right.
And in the process, people have been identified that may have facilitated the travel of a number of people. That's also a criminal offence, and we'll continue to investigate that.
Look, unfortunately we've run out of time, Brett. Thank you very much for coming on the Y Factor and explaining these points. I think that the community does need to hear it, and I look forward to hearing the feedback from the community, in fact. So thanks again.
Yeah, I do too, Mustafa. Thanks very much for having me.
All good. You're listening to the Y Factor on 87.6 FM.